Greetings, everyone. My name is Eric Stevens. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Engagement with 4Point. And welcome to this episode of 4Point Pathways, our podcast on all things forms. And today I want to expand upon a podcast that I did earlier around migration from legacy systems. And in that, I talked about the importance and the value of moving from older versions of Adobe Experience Manager, from Adobe LiveCycle, from JetForm Central and JetForm Central Pro into the current version and keeping the current version up to date. And the key points that I made in that were around security, operating systems, maintainability, latest features, all of those. But one of the challenges that people have is that their expectations for that, I'm not even going to call it an upgrade, that migration from an older version to the newer version, they don't understand the amount of effort that goes into it. And they don't understand the potential traps. Recently talked to an organization, this was last year at DSF, came up to me and said, hey, can you help us with this? Is our environment isn't working properly inside of Adobe Experience Manager. And they described to me the scenarios and I went, you migrated from 6.3 to 6.4, didn't you? And they went, yes, how did you know? I said, because you're describing all of the challenges because you missed this step and this step and this step, all right? And yeah, so we think we should go to 6.5. I said, no. You got to stabilize 6.4 first, then we can move you to 6.5, then we can bring you up to date. But all of these things need to be changed because between 6.3 and 6.4, Adobe deprecated a whole bunch of features. They removed a whole bunch of features that you're using, and you have to change those. All right. And if you don't read the READMEs in detail the way we do, because that's what we do, if you don't go through all of those documents in excruciating detail, then you don't know that. And so you think that it's just an upgrade. But here's the difference. Folks think is, well, it's just an upgrade. So it's like upgrading Windows 11 or Windows 10. All I have to do is just wait and it automatically happens. I just have to press the button and it automatically happens. Well, yes, but no. That's true in a lot of cases when you're on AEM 6.5 and you're upgrading from Service Pack 13 to Service Pack 14. That's mostly true. There are some things because things change that might have changed and affect you. But in general, that's pretty much true. You load the Service Pack on, and unless you're doing something very specific that has changed, you're fine. Everything's fine. But that's not what you're doing. What you're doing is you're going, I'm going to use the example of LiveCycle. You're going from LiveCycle to AEM 6.5. Now, AEM is the evolution of LiveCycle. Everything that you did in LiveCycle and more, you can do in AEM. But many things have changed. And the analogy that we use is that that is not an upgrade, like adding a feature to Windows 10. That is like you asking, why can't the program that I used in Windows 95 work without changes in Windows 11? You know it's not going to. You know you cannot take it. It probably won't even read the CD. I don't even have it. In this computer, I don't even have a CD. I have CDs over there from Windows 95. Yes, I know that's sad, but I do. And they will, I can't even get them loaded on here. And none of them will run at all, period. Because they have to be changed at the code level. When you're building a form and you're building an application data on top of the platform that is Adobe Experience Manager. That platform has many, many functions inside it that do the things that you needed to be done. So for example, one of the calls that you make, and you don't even know it, when you have to take a template and render it with data, you make a call to output. If you have multiple PDFs and you need to merge them together into one PDF, you call assembler. If you've got an image and you need converted to a template or to a PDF so that you can merge it with other ones, including the data ones, then you call PDFG, output, and assembler, and you merge those all together. If anything about those calls inside of AEM has changed from the LiveCycle, and they have, but if anything's changed, your functionality between the form and the rendering has to change. And that's why it's a migration not an upgrade. All right. And so that's the difference. That's what's going on here is sometimes we have to rebuild the environment completely. This becomes especially important when we start talking about migration to a cloud environment. Yes, it's AEM 6.5 and I'm migrating it to the cloud in AEM 6.5, but on the on-prem environment, we've talked about this in the past, there's two different versions. There's a Java Extended Edition, J2E, and there is an OSGI environment. Those two environments can coexist in an on-prem scenario, but only OSGI is supported in the cloud scenario. That means all of your Workbench J2E processes need to be rewritten in OSGI. Now, there's a lot of that one maps to that one, that one maps to that one, that one maps to that one. But at a minimum, I've got to map those across. And if you created any special functionality in the J2E Workbench environment, I got to rewrite that over here. And it's a rewrite. You can't pick that code up and drop it because, again, it's calling all sorts of internal functions that may or may not exist or may exist, but they're different. So now I got to rewrite this over here so that now your OSGI workflow does the same business process as the J2E workflow. So now it can migrate up to the cloud. Let me give you an example of some of the things that have changed. So things like jQuery that we use to do adaptive forms, that's changed over the lifetime of Adobe Experience Manager. The original mechanism that was introduced to do this, that's modified and changed. So if you did adaptive forms early on, they had to change as we migrated across. Mechanisms associated with different client libraries, what's called the Handlebars library, Granite Sling, a variety of different libraries need to be updated because we need to support the new functionality in them in AEM. So those need to be migrated across so that the environment, the forms environment, the forms application takes proper advantage of that. So some of the other things is functionality gets deprecated. In the original versions of AEM, there was a thing called AEM Mobile. That's no longer supported. So there's different pieces that just go away. So if you were using them, if you're going all the way back to JetForm Central, there used to be a migration tool from Central to LiveCycle. That tool no longer exists. So organizations, and yes, there are some, where we're trying to shift them from JetForm Central to a modern version of AEM 6.5, we're not even using anything. We're not migrating them. We're rebuilding the environment completely, rebuilding the application completely inside of Adobe Experience Manager because the differences is so great. Lots of different functionality that existed in the past has simply been removed. There's no replacement. Right. And you can get a full list of this. We can go through and get you a full list. There's a full list of these. And when we go in and do a migration analysis, we review all of these. We do that kind of migration analysis for organizations where we go, this is what you have to change. This is all the things that have to be changed. We also do it from a cloud perspective. Sometimes you're using an old API. It's completely different. It exists, but it exists in a different format, or it needs to be brought up to speed on it, right? Things like Forms Designer, okay? The Form Designer has been upgraded. The Forms Designer uses different versions of other libraries, Microsoft libraries, that need to be the modern libraries. So that means that the older ones will only run on older systems. And when you bring it up to the new ones, you have to reload it. Now, that doesn't necessarily change the form design in a lot of cases, but it might, because there might have been something that was in the older environment, a font or something that you were using, and now it has to be reloaded on the current one. Again, it's not necessarily a lot for each of these individual things, but if there's lots of these, then all of these can add up, and they all have to be caught, because if they're not caught, if you don't catch that the font was wrong, then now you were using a particular font at that point in time. Now you're using a slightly different one. Does that mean pagination is slightly off? Does that mean paragraphs are slightly off? Yes, it entirely could. So those are the little subtle things that can build up over time. A lot of JSON has been modified over time. So if you have an older application, even at 6.3, an application using different JSON functionality. If that functionality has been deprecated or replaced because newer libraries have been incorporated into AEM, then that's a different piece entirely. Things like the CAPTCHAs used on forms. So if you've got a form that you filled out, it's going to be a public-facing form, you want to put a CAPTCHA, the robot test. Well, the original CAPTCHAs completely deprecated. Now we're using reCAPTCHA by Google. So those have changed. So there's a lot of these little things that can catch up all the way along. Different PDF generators you might have used in the past. Now it's completely different because all the PDF formats have been upgraded over time. That's one of the challenges, because when you're talking LiveCycle to AEM 6.5, you're talking 10, 12, 14 years. Back to JetForm Central, you're talking 20, 22, 23 years. Okay, so that's what's happened, is we've gone so long, lots of stuff got updated, lots of stuff got changed. All right. Different installers, different connections to digital asset management tools, different mechanisms of way that would have been used in the past that they didn't see many people using, but if you're using it, now it has to be rebuilt associated with it. One of my favorite ones that we have seen is the original Forms Designer supported Flash, Adobe Flash. Well, we don't support Adobe Flash now. All right, so could you see a form that was built 15 years ago with a Flash object inside of the form? Yes, you did. You absolutely did see that. All right. Now, many people have removed those, but if you haven't caught up because you're still running on LiveCycle, yeah, now we've got a problem, right? One of the big ones is also the Internet Explorer and the fact that it doesn't support. So AEM 6.4 is the last release that supports Internet Explorer 11. The newer versions do not support it. All right. Now, you shouldn't be using Internet Explorer because Microsoft doesn't support that anymore. But there's still folks out there wanting that same behavior, wanting that same functionality because that's what they had in the past. Right. So there's lots of that. We can actually give you a map of upgrade paths. And what we often do is follow a more complex path if we need to move it, or we stop and we say, we have to rewrite the application in the new environment. And sometimes it's just easier to rewrite the application in the new environment rather than taking the steps that go ES2 to ES4 SP1 that then go to 6.4 with changes that can then go to 6.5, that could then go to 6.5 and Service Pack 14. So there's a lot of different paths and different variations. We try to find the most efficient path, but often it's just, no, you need to think about starting over in there. What we can also do is help you identify where the critical factors are. And you may choose as, okay, maybe I'd move that later, or maybe I do rebuild that, but I can move all of these. All of these will go over okay. Then that would be fine. So it really depends on where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. I'm working with one organization, they're running LiveCycle and AEM side by side. The older forms, the fillable forms are generated through LiveCycle, and they're building new adaptive forms to replace the fillable forms, new adaptive forms inside of the AEM environment. And they have a plan to rebuild all of the fillable PDF forms in the adaptive forms environment. Okay, that's great. That's a viable migration strategy, but you notice what they did there. They're not trying to upgrade the LiveCycle. They're rebuilding it, taking advantage of the new AEM environment and the new capabilities inside of AEM. So that's what I want to do, is I wanted to lay out some of those critical factors and how AEM as a platform is something that, even though now you can upgrade it, service packs, moving it from what the platform was decades ago may require significant changes in your application that's sitting on top of the platform, that's sitting on top of the operating system, because features, functionality, APIs, capabilities, all of it is changed over time. And many of it has shifted in ways that require you to make changes to your forms and to your workflows and to your processes, to your data integrations, to how you integrate with other pieces. All of those things have changed and needs to be updated as you move through and bring it up to speed. And sometimes the best way to do it is to take what you've got now as a set of design, a set of requirements, and build it new in that environment. But that takes time. So that's what I wanted to lay out for you. It's not a straightforward process. You can't just go from here to here, overnight. It requires work, it requires adjustment, and it requires changes to make sure that what you're doing in the past will work on today's environment. If you have any questions about this, if you're dealing with these challenges, please give us a call. We can walk through what is available to you. There's a lot of material up on the Adobe website that can give you some information on it, but we'd be happy to have a chat with you and help guide you through this transition process. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Take care.